When faced with the choice to forgive someone or not, how do we gain the perspective that we know we should in the face of our anger at being wronged? Well, I can't possibly provide all the answers to that, but there are some really powerful principles that can help us in the passage we're looking at today. I'm Peter Franson from christiangeekcentral.com and Spirit Blade Productions. Right now, I'm going to attempt to examine the Bible and dissect some of the churchy language we can easily take for granted, digging into history and languages as I'm able anyway to try and get at the heart of the text so that we can hopefully see and then apply at least some of what God has for you and me in these words today. Now, I'm not formally trained in Scripture. I'm just a guy using resources and a questioning mind to try and get at the truth, and that's something that we can all do, so I hope you'll do that with me. We're making our way through the brief book of Philemon and are at verses 11 through 14 of its single chapter, which in the ESV reads, "Formerly he was useless to you, but now he is indeed useful to you and to me. I am sending him back to you, sending my very heart. I would have been glad to keep him with me in order that he might serve me on your behalf during my imprisonment for the gospel, but I preferred to do nothing without your consent, in order that your goodness might not be by compulsion, but of your own accord." Okay, so leading up to this point in the letter, Paul has affirmed the good qualities in Philemon's character, the one that he's writing to, and has affirmed his gratitude for Philemon's love and care for other believers in his local church. And so in light of these characteristics, that's where we're picking up now, Paul is now shifting to plead with Philemon on behalf of Onesimus, the one that he says was useless to you before, but is useful to you and to me now. Onesimus was a slave under the ownership of Philemon who ran away, possibly having stolen from Philemon on the way out, and who then became a Christian after meeting and spending time with Paul. Paul now loves Onesimus like a child. In describing Onesimus this way, it seems Paul is trying to help Philemon see Onesimus in a different category, that of a child dearly loved by Paul rather than as a slave. Paul continues this recontextualization of Onesimus in verse 11, which again says, "Formerly he was useless to you, but now he is indeed useful to you and to me." There's a play on words happening here. The name Onesimus was a common slave name at this time, meaning useful. Paul points to the ironic fact that while a slave under Philemon, Onesimus was not useful, but now he has changed and become truly useful as a result of coming to faith in Jesus. Now, the specific nature of his new usefulness is not indicated. It may be that he was an ineffective servant before and serves wholeheartedly now, or he may be more useful in the sense of his service to God's kingdom now. In either case, this is another way in which Paul seems to want to persuade Philemon to put Onesimus in a different mental category than he had previously. Before, Onesimus was lost and in a frame of mind in opposition to God, as we all are before we come to faith in Jesus. But now he lives in light of truth, and Onesimus' life has changed and become fruitful as a result. Verse 12 again says, "I am sending him back to you, sending my very heart." This is a striking decision, a striking statement on Paul's part. He's not waiting to be sure that Philemon has been successfully persuaded to reconcile with Onesimus. He is sending Onesimus back to Philemon, trusting in Philemon to do what is right. He's not forcing church discipline on Philemon, but is creating an opportunity for him to do the right thing and is showing great trust in him to do that. That's a powerful thing to do when we're trying to persuade someone to recognize sin in their life, is to consider the ways that we can affirm them and try to, as much as we can, leave this choice up to them rather than presenting a wagging finger. Really present them another option, and if we can, based on who we know them to be, affirming trust in them and in their ability to make this right decision. So yeah, great trust that he's showing Philemon as he sends Onesimus, as he sends Onesimus back to him. He also conveys the sense of vulnerable risk that Paul feels by describing this move as sending his very heart to Philemon. The implication is that whatever Philemon does to Onesimus, Paul will feel it greatly because of his deep love for Onesimus. Although Paul is appealing to Philemon on an emotional level, in part here, this is not passive aggression and would not have read that way when it was written. So I think we need to be careful if we see that kind of thing going on and then we think that we can kind of employ passive aggression to kind of manipulate people today. That's not what's going on here. That's not how it would have been received. Appeals to emotion were common, and Paul's approach in this situation matches the type of argumentation that educated and wealthy citizens would have been accustomed to. So in all of this, Paul's appealing to Philemon in a way that is well-reasoned, that it is persuasive on a heart level, but is also showing genuine respect for Philemon rather than manipulation. Verse 13. I would have been glad to keep him with me, he says, in order that he might serve me on your behalf during my imprisonment for the gospel. But I preferred to do nothing without your consent, in order that your goodness might not be by compulsion, but of your own accord. Again, Paul is showing great trust in Philemon, assuming that he would almost certainly agree with Paul and gladly allow Philemon to remain and be a help to him. And in mentioning his imprisonment for the gospel, I think he's again recontextualizing this whole topic, Onesimus' life, Philemon's life, to all lie within God's kingdom purposes. He points out that Onesimus could continue serving Paul and therefore God's kingdom, which is something Paul knew Philemon would ultimately want. And yet, Paul wants Philemon to have the opportunity to choose that outcome himself, to choose that thing that would be in service to the kingdom, to the gospel. He doesn't want to force a falsely good choice onto Philemon, but for Philemon to make the right choice from a changed heart. All right, so reflecting on this, thinking about us as geeks, our tendencies, it occurs to me that we sometimes find it more difficult to navigate relationships, to navigate conflict compared to other people who are, let's just say, more socially seasoned. So I think there are some great principles here that can be helpful to us when we are angry at someone for how they have wronged us. We're trying to figure out, how do we navigate, how do we get through this situation? Maybe we know, at least in theory, on some academic level, that yes, we're supposed to forgive this person, but man, we are dealing with these feelings, And again, I don't want to imply that this passage here has all we need to navigate those situations. There are situations where people have been wronged so intensely, so deeply, that I can't possibly, in a short video, in a short Bible study segment, provide all the tools, nor would I claim to know all the tools that can really help people. There are many situations where, yes, we need biblical principles to help us, but we also need good, qualified counseling that hopefully is also coming from a biblical perspective. That really is the ideal. So I'm talking more about kind of like the garden variety anger and frustration that we can feel, that sometimes is pretty intense, but nevertheless is not like a deeply scarring type of anger. Although I think there's principles here that still apply to that. So anyway, that's just kind of a caveat. I don't want to be oversimplistic in what I'm saying here. But yes, I do think there are some great principles here that can be helpful to us when we are angry at someone for how they have wronged us. Paul is helping Onesimus develop a broader context and perspective on Philemon, on the one who's wronged him. Philemon sinned against Onesimus when he was in a place of spiritual darkness, which certainly unbelievers are in, but believers can find themselves there too. It doesn't mean that they aren't responsible for their actions, but it does help us adjust our expectations and develop care and sympathy when we factor in the backgrounds of those who have wronged us. Sometimes, as I have been angry with people, what has really been helpful to me is to consider, well, what's their background? How did they get to this point? Why did they behave in such a foolish and hurtful way? Well, because this is what's been going on in their history. So, and when I consider that, my expectations lower for them, and I think this also helps in advance, before someone wrongs you. If you learn to not expect more from them than is reasonable based on their background. But this is also something that's been helpful to me as I'm processing how someone has wronged me. I think that I'll get back to my notes here. I don't want to ramble on that. Paul tells Philemon that the one who wronged him is deeply loved by Paul, someone that Philemon valued, respected. And I think in the same way, we can and should remember that those who wrong us are deeply loved by God, just as we are. What else? Paul draws attention to the gospel context of this whole situation, and by implication to God's desire to bring rescue and transformation to the world. This is work that we are called to be a part of, that Philemon was called to be a part of. And so this situation of conflict and how Philemon chooses to handle it is very relevant to Philemon's and Paul's engagement in God's purposes. In the same way, when we have been wronged and are facing the choice to forgive someone, we are in the middle of a moment that is infused with God's purposes for our lives and for the world. We have the opportunity to live out a glimpse of God's eternal kingdom that will point to His love and His patience and His grace. When we give grace and forgive, it has a huge impact, whether on those we forgive, those who see that situation but maybe aren't in the middle of it, or it has an impact on ourselves and our own hearts. There's so much freedom that comes from letting go of the responsibility to make sure someone gets what they deserves, taking that responsibility off of our own shoulders. That's essentially what forgiveness is. It doesn't mean saying that they weren't wrong, that they didn't sin, that they didn't hurt us, and that we aren't still feeling the hurt of what they've done. But it means that we are not going to hold that against them in the sense of taking it upon ourselves to try and make sure that they get everything that's coming to them, And so when we give grace, when we forgive, it's a very significant moment because it echoes God's forgiveness and His rescue that is extended as an offer to all of humanity. So although forgiveness is often very difficult and it often doesn't feel great as we do it, having a broader kingdom perspective, having a broader perspective on the one who has wronged us can help make it less difficult to offer forgiveness and can even create a very significant moment that is fulfilling to us and meaningful, even life-giving to others as we begin at least to recognize God's purposes in it. Well, what do you think of all that? How is that striking you? What are you pondering right now in light of that? Let me know in the comments. It is time again for Christian Geek Central's annual Game Save event, fundraising for St. Jude Children's Research Hospital, which provides free treatment for children facing life or death circumstances and shares its cutting-edge, life-saving research with hospitals all over the world. You're still welcome to join the Game Save team by following the link in the description below. Once again this year, I'm drawing attention to our team's fundraising by performing a 24-hour marathon of video gaming that I will stream live on youtube.com/ChristianGeekCentral beginning 6 a.m. Arizona time on Saturday, November 9th. You can donate or get more info by clicking on my fundraising page in the links below, where you will also find incentives and rewards for doing so. For $5, you can choose a topic for me to share my sometimes overly strong opinions on during my live stream. For $10, you get the previous reward and a download code for a free copy of the Spirit Blade Special Edition audio drama. For $20, you get the previous rewards and you can choose a game for me to play during my November 9th live stream. Pick a favorite or torture me with something terrible or rage-inducingly difficult. For $30, you get the previous rewards and can choose a song for me to sing during my live stream. Pick an old favorite of yours or just make me humiliate and torture myself with something no one wants to hear. And for $50, you get all the previous rewards and a download code for every MP3 product at spiritblade.com. That's a $90 value. On top of that, I have set fundraising milestones that will unlock fun or weird happenings as I reach them. At $200, I'll have a free download day for for everyone who visits spiritblade.com on November 16th. And as my total goes beyond 200, I'll unlock increasingly more content for that free download day. And depending on how far beyond $200 my fundraising goes, during my November 9th live stream, I will cover my face in peanut butter and jelly while talking about horror movies, put on a pair of Frozen socks and a Frozen t-shirt at the same time, shoot water up my nose with a turkey baster, and have my wife Holly play a video game with me for 30 minutes. And if I reach a personal fundraising total of $500 or more, I will schedule a 6-hour bonus live stream before the end of the year to either try and finish Dragon Age Inquisition as my bitter old wizard elder est, or start a new roleplay focused playthrough as, well, that's a secret for now. Finally, if I reach my $500 goal by the end of Thursday, October 24th, I will do a 4-hour Get Good live stream before the end of the year, playing a frustratingly difficult game in my collection. Probably another NES Castlevania title. Now, there are some stipulations and time limits on those rewards and milestones, so quickly follow the link below to my fundraising page for all the details. This year will mark 10 years since our first gaming-themed charity fundraiser for kids in great need of medical care. I hope you'll be a part of celebrating that and helping me and the Christian Geek Central Game Save team do some good for some kids who really need it. Then please join me at youtube.com/ChristianGeekCentral for my 24-hour marathon starting at 6 a.m. Arizona time on Saturday, November 9th. Hope to see you then.
Oh my gosh. This is all kinds of wrong.